Welcome to the very first episode of my podcast, Café Con Sara, where we are going on a deep dive of Cuban American cuisine in my home city of Miami. I'm your host, Sarah Fuego, and today we are sipping coffee.
Mira, aquí, sí.
We are joined today by a special guest. Obviously, like I said, this podcast is specifically about the Cuban American cuisine and culture in Miami of Florida. So I thought, who is a better guest to have on to talk about Miami than another Miami native? So today we have fellow Miamian, my best friend Amariah.
Hi, thank you for inviting me on the podcast.
We're so lucky to have her. It's actually really surprisingly difficult to come by Miamians in Tampa.
Actually, yeah.
So we have a very rare guest today. And since we are obviously on Café Con Sara, we're on our namesake, we're going to talk a little bit about coffee for our first episode because that's what we're here for. Specifically Cuban coffee, because I'm Cuban and that's what this is about. We have 3 different types lined up here, and we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive on each of the 3. We're going to do some taste testing. We have our mugs ready to taste test, and we're going to learn a little bit about the history of some Cuban coffee also.
All right, I'm ready.
So I don't know if you were aware of this, but coffee growing goes way back to the 18th century. Obviously, Caribbean islands were colonized, so European colonizers came to the Caribbean and they said, you know what we're going to start growing things here. So coffee beans and sugar were 2 of the big things that they started growing, specifically in Cuba. But they actually began with the French in what is now Haiti. So the French colonized Haiti, obviously, and they started growing coffee beans there through slave labor on plantations. Initially, things were going well for the French. But there were slave labor revolts, so the French fled. They were like, we can't be here anymore. We're going to go take advantage of people elsewhere. And they came to Cuba. And they started growing their coffee beans there. And it took off really quickly. Within 53 years of there being the French in Cuba taking over the plantations, starting plantations, there went from, and they're called cafetas, which are the coffee growing plantations in Cuba at the time. There were 10 when they first got there, and it grew to almost 600 within 53 years. So it was a crazy uptake. Took off like crazy.
Yes, I would say so.
Coffee economy was going well for a little while. By the 1960s, though, Castro was in power. At that point, Cuba had been hit by a couple different nasty hurricanes. It was too expensive for the farmers to get back onto the coffee growing train, I guess you could call it. And at that point, coffee was already being treated like a luxury. It was rationed among families, and the economy and political state was just not in a place where Cuba could kind of recover from that. And so we have places like Brazil and Colombia taking up the international coffee trade.
Oh, wow.
But when Castro did come into power, and even prior to that, you had a ton of Cubans immigrating and leaving, and they came to Florida, and they came to Miami. So a lot of the Cuban culture in Miami is connected to coffee and connected to the ritual of making coffee, sharing coffee, that sort of vibe. So you are not Cuban. You are, do you want to tell people what you are, what your heritage is?
I am Jamaican and Guyanese.
Yes. So we are going to put your Miami-ness to the test today with a little bit of coffee. We have our Colada. This is our Colada. She's super cute. Have you ever had one of these?
Yeah.
You have?
In middle school, the teachers would go around and you would pass out the coffee.
Period.
And so after school one day, instead of taking it to a teacher, we snuck it and we drank it. And then
very
we continued.
sneaky.
Yeah.
So Amariah is totally right. The Colada is essentially just a ton of little cafecitos, which a cafecito is just pure espresso. It's pure café cubano. This is café cubano. And you make it in a cafetera the way you would make espresso, and you share it amongst people. So we're going to share it. We have our mugs. Would you like some?
Yes, I would like to try it.
We're going to be hyped up by the end of this.
You know what?
We're going to be bouncing off the walls. Official taste testing.
Yeah.
She's strong.
I'm gonna take another sip.
I'm gonna go back for more.
So good.
So yeah, so this is the strongest one of the 3 that we have here, because like I said, it's essentially just cafecitos, which is essentially just pure espresso.
That one's truly just pure espresso, nothing.
Well, I added sugar to all of these because I drink sugar in my coffee.
Okay, I was gonna ask.
So it does have sugar in it because
Okay.
I don't like it without. So our history lesson on the colada is pretty simple. It's like as bare bones as you can get. It's made for sharing, which is a huge, like you said, your origin with the coladas in your school. Yeah, exactly. You could bring it to work. Usually they come with, obviously they did us dirty and they gave us a small one, but you usually have like a much bigger styrofoam cup, and then you get like little shot glasses, not glasses, little plastic shot containers.
I know what you mean.
You know what I mean? And then you could share.
Yeah, visiting my mom at work, she works at a hospital, and
Mhm.
they have like their little like colada time where they go and set it up and everything.
Exactly. It's very much a sharing situation. Oh, and then you can't really tell when I poured it, but, and this is when I make coffee, I can't do it. I have not mastered it, but there's like this foam.
The little foam at the top.
Yes, it actually has a name, which I did not know. It's called espumita, and it's literally just the first like spurts of coffee are allegedly the most bitter.
Mm-hmm.
So you pour them out and whip them up with sugar. And it is supposed to be brown sugar, but you could do either, I'm assuming, because I don't use brown sugar. I'm assuming because I don't do it. And listen, it tastes good. And you whip that up, and then you pour the rest of it
on
in there.
top?
Yeah.
Okay, and is that only with the colada, or is that with all?
It's I think it's just in this one, because with the other ones, the sugar is in like different places when they make it.
Okay.
Which we'll get into as we move on. Okay, so this next one, I'm kind of wary because when they came, they arrived in different containers. So I'm not used to this looking so shrimpish and small. But we're on to our second one. We have our Cortadito. Have you ever had one of these?
I feel like I have, but I could not tell you when.
You're a coffee connoisseur, by the way. We haven't touched on that. Amariah makes a coffee every day.
Okay, only recently. I've only started becoming a little coffee connoisseur, but growing up, we never really drank coffee. We were a tea household, so every morning you would drink tea, but you wouldn't drink coffee.
So do you feel like now you are?
Now I've kind of forced myself to learn more things. Either like asking you and having you help me like make coffee in the morning, or like just looking it up online and looking at the different ways like people in different countries make coffee.
We
do. Trying it out.
We love a TikTok recipe around these parts.
Yes, we do.
The difference, and low-key now that I'm pouring them, I'm feeling like I switched them up. But that's totally fine.
But this is a cortadito?
This is a cortadito. And yeah, so the difference should be, which is, we'll see when what we have taste tested, that this one has milk in it. It doesn't have like fresh milk, because if we take a little stroll back on our history lesson, at this point in Cuba, there is no fresh milk. We are deep in the trenches. And the cortadito also has a history in Spanish colonialism, because if we go back in time a little bit, it is actually originally called the cortado, which is how the Spanish do it, and that is with fresh milk. So Spaniards in the island would make their own version, and it would essentially be a 1-to-1 ratio of coffee to milk.
Cut the milk with the
yes,
coffee.
And all the Cubans were like, that looks delish, but we have no milk. You know what comes in a can? Leche condensada. So they would use condensed milk, and they would sweeten it like that. And so it's supposed to be extra sweet. Some people now, like when you get it, depending on where you go to, will just use normal milk. But the traditional way that you're supposed to have one of these is that you're supposed to have it with condensed milk. So,
okay.
Cheers.
Cheers.
My review. And this is why I think that we have
switch them.
Being mixed. This is Café Cubano with sugar. There's no milk in this. I don't taste any milk.
There's no milk in this.
There's no milk. So they've been switched, which is easy to do because they're disguised. But this to me is almost more delicious than this, because I have a hunchinsky that this is normal milk and not condensed the way that it should be.
Oh, okay.
That's what my palate is saying. This is, to me, typically, although it might not be today because this one is really good, this is our star player.
All right.
This is a Café Con Leche. It is the only one of the three that is more milk than coffee, because one of which we have all coffee, no milk. One of which we have half milk, half coffee. And this is like a 3/4 milk to a shot of espresso type vibe.
Okay.
So it's very milky. This is also, of course, if it has milk in it, the Spaniards were involved. So of course, this one is also a result of a little bit of good old-fashioned colonialism.
Right. Yes.
So it's very milky.
Yeah.
But she's delish.
I love milk and sugar in anything. And so this is just my favorite.
Yeah, like this. And the other great thing about this is you can drink the whole thing.
You don't have to worry about like how much caffeine you're drinking.
You
like,
can
it just
down the whole
good.
thing. When you come in with your colada or your little cafecitos, you're here to make friends. You're here to like spread the joy and spread the love a little bit.
True.
And then this you get every day on your way to work for yourself. 100%. You know what I mean? Or like every Sunday I see my grandmother and I have one with her. So I think that is kind of like the aspect there that is, you know, a little bit
passing down like that tradition.
Very communal, yes. Very cultural.
I would agree because I have like a lot of fond memories like in school, like making like the little colada. And then now my dad and I started like that tradition where like before he drops me off to like the airport, we stop at like Pinecrest Bakery and we both pick up like a Café Con Leche.
And I think that is another really good point, which I'm very glad you brought up.
Oh, okay. Look at me.
Pinecrest Bakery is a Latin bakery in South Florida. I think there's some of them up here, maybe.
Is there?
I've never been to one. I could be lying to y'all. Miami is very influenced by Cuban culture, and Cubans came over here and they did a lot of this stuff, especially with a cafecito and especially with the Café Con Leche. Those are very Cuban. And so I think that it's really speaks to the culture in Miami that you can anybody can show up at a Pinecrest Bakery and be like, we're here for this. And I think it's really cool. That's a tradition that you have with your Guyanese dad that that you guys stop for a Cuban coffee. Like, I think that speaks a lot to the culture of
that
Miami
has.
Yeah.
I think that a lot of things, like for example, you saying like you have this experience like with coffee, and I'm like, oh, like I had this kind of similar experience with my dad with coffee, and it's kind of like vice versa, just the same.
Yeah.
That like I'll mention something and be like, oh, I do this with my Jamaican mother. And you'd be like, oh yeah, I go to the same place and I eat. And I think like that ingrainedness really is something specific to our city.
Yes. True, our city. So are you inspired now to perfect your Café Con Leche recipe?
I think I have to in order to pay homage to Miami. I think that I won't feel like a true Miamian unless I fully learn how to do it. I now on my little cafecito, my cafetera.
Yeah.
There I go, look at I'm learning.
Yeah.
So I think the next step in the order is to learn how.
Naturally.
Right.
Sure.
So there we go.
So yeah, I feel like honestly, coffee is just such a huge part of not only the Cuban American experience, but the Cuban American experience in Miami. And I feel like not only was it important enough that I decided to name this entire podcast after it, I definitely wanted to dedicate our very first episode to it. And we were lucky enough to have a special guest for our pilot, Amariah. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me.
Putting up with it. You know?
I'll do anything for some coffee.
For some free coffee, that is true. We did get, I didn't get free coffee, I paid for it. And Mariah got free coffee. And that is pretty much our episode for today. I will see you next time. And yeah, you want to say goodbye?
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Mira, aquí, sí, sí, sí.